I want to begin looking at the importance of semantics in this session. So I'm going to start with the basic slide again. So this is the basic slide of the primary switch, what I'm calling the primary switch. And this is what I think is at the bottom of our human ways of thinking. And it's at the root of our argument with God himself. Do we live out every part of our personal reality in communion with, in response to, in a loving relationship with our God, our Maker, our King? Or do we turn our backs on God and find our reason for being and reason for existence and whole way of life in that which is below us, in something, not in our God? And as we look then at the universe around us, this is the primary switch that we face every moment. This is another view of the same switch, and what I'm saying is that this switch affects every part of our lives and thinking, and it results in a totally different pair of atmospheres of mind. One is an atmosphere of reverence. It's what Paul calls godliness, God-centeredness, God awareness, God joy, which issues in a happy life of service of God, which he describes as a life of right living, of rightness, righteousness. It's the same stuff as meaningfulness, significance, and happiness. Holiness, that's really what it is. And the other possibility is that we live a life of ungodliness, the opposite of that, with no reverence, no ultimate meaning, no ultimate significance, and this issues in a life of lawlessness and unhappiness, a life of misery. It's just recapping, really. The same thing here is what I believe is Paul's basic argument with regards to the foundation of the gospel of God, the good news of God's Son coming into the world to save us from this awful predicament that we find ourselves in. And this is the foundational elements on which that good news is based. That there is two views, really, of reality and of ourselves. One finds its foundation in God, and one finds its foundation in godlessness. And so on this slide, just to recap, we have our human origins in the first marriage, the first man, the first woman, created by God, created as a picture of God's purpose for humanity. It's a love relationship between humanity and God, and this is pictured then in God's arrangement of the very origin of humanity in one man and one woman being joined together in a covenant relationship as a picture of our relationship with God, the humanity relationship with God. And the alternative to that, then, instead of picturing our origin in God, we picture our origin in that which is less than we are. We say that all things came from next to nothing, if not nothing, and the reality builds up from it emerges from the impersonal, and the personal is just an accidental coming together of bits and pieces of impersonalness happening to produce persons. And this goes through some kind of evolutionary process, and there's a preview of that idea there in Romans chapter 1, and Paul traces it interestingly back not to non-life, but he traces it back to reptile life, and that's significant and interesting what he does there. And so the big questions then that we all face: who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What am I for? All of these questions, we find the basic answer in one of these two positions, and which way we switch depends on the whole way in which we look at the universe around us, whether we see in that universe evidence for intelligence, evidence for design, evidence for deliberate activity to make that universe suitable for humanity, or whether we see it just as a whole bunch of accidents and happenings. And of course, this results in two different ways of life. I've said that already, but that's pictured there on that previous slide. But what I'm saying is that this has implications in every area of life. It's not just in terms of religious life, but it affects every part of our being. So this is the basic psychological switch. It is the basic fundamental switch in our minds. And this has consequences for all of our psychology, all of our thinking, all of the way in which we look at the universe, and all of the way, the whole atmosphere of all of our thoughts. And it has implications for sociology. We've already said that. The whole way of life is built upon this foundation, and there are two different sorts of way of life that are built on these two different sorts of thinking. And this has implications for philosophy, and our whole civilization is built on one of these two ways of thinking. And sadly, since the Enlightenment, the dominant way of thinking has been with this downward view of materialism and of emergentism, everything emerging from the material, everything emerging from something instead of from someone. And it's fascinating to me that there seems to be an actual biological and actual neurological basis for these two ways of thinking. This switch does seem to be encapsulated in the actual structure of the human being. And so we have leftness and rightness, and we have these two sides of our body, and these two sides of our body are reflected in the two sides of our brain. And these two sides of our brain are almost like two different persons. And in some ways, you could think of them as two different centers of consciousness in communion. So there is this very, very basic division of the human being into these two sides, and the two sides of the brain seem to engage in two ways of looking at the world. So Ian McGilchrist particularly has been advocating this way of understanding how we think. There's a left brain view of reality and a right brain view of reality, and these are in tension, and then they're neither of them all of the truth, and neither side can exist without the other. But the intention is that the right brain's view of reality should be the dominant view, with the left brain being the submissive view. And what happens then in the Enlightenment is that the two sides of human thinking switch, and the left brain becomes dominant. And this you can trace this out in actual philosophical argument and philosophical positions. And so I would argue that the two great thinkers particularly in Western civilization, you can trace these two strands of ways of thinking to Thomas Reid and David Hume. with the right brain view of reality, coming from Thomas Reid and his common sense philosophy. It's been called the Scottish philosophy, or the Scottish common sense realism way of doing philosophy. And this contrasts with David Hume's way of doing philosophy, which is empiricism and which is materialism, which is what ends up being atheism. And sadly, the dominant direction has been this disastrous left brain atheistic view, and it finds its expression in undoing the whole idea of design in nature, design in reality. It looks at the world and it sees no design. It insists on seeing no design, no intelligence, and it insists that all of the things that were for centuries viewed as that which proved the ultimate personness behind reality, the ultimate design that there is in reality itself. It insists on looking at all of that as just impersonal happenings. So Darwin is a very important part of this process of the denial of design, the undoing of design in nature. And it's important to realize that this isn't just a matter of science versus unreason. That's a completely false view of the whole argument. This is not just about science. This is about the whole way of looking at reality, the whole way of looking at the world. And of course, if you look at the world in a certain way, if you look at the world in a materialistic left brain, going downwards view, you will inevitably have to find some way of explaining the origins of the things that are complex, that are ordered. You have to find a reason for order, and this is the whole business of evolution and Darwin. It is finding a way to explain order in the universe without an orderer. And I'm convinced that it's a disaster, and it's a complete nonsense. But it's a left brain phenomenon that results in an openness to unreason with regards to this whole area of intelligence and design. And I would argue that this stream of thought, I know that there are many atheists and materialists who would deny this, but this stream of thought of the removal of ultimate responsibility, the removal of ultimate law and order, does result in catastrophic events and the establishment of alternative views of reality and civilization and social being that find expression in dominant totalitarian leaderships that fill this vacuum with a heroic, sort of, in inverted commas, a heroic leader. There's a huge vacuum in the souls of people who go down this route, and there is this openness to an alternative leader, a great figure, a hero, and they really end up being anti-heroes: Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, and so on. And this is the view then that you can have only things happening. It is always something happened that produces an event. At the bottom of everything is something, not someone. And this has consequences socially. It has consequences with regards to human relationships and views of what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And you end up breaking down human relationships into all of these different categories of human being. Instead of having the simple masculinity and femininity, the two sexes, you have this breaking down into all kinds of identity and trying to find authenticity in increasingly smaller and smaller bizarre ways of thinking about human relationships and interpersonal reality. And of course, the ultimate expression of this view is death and silence. The people who follow this view have to find their origin in death and silence. Everything comes from death and silence, and ultimately everything leads to death and silence. And this means that this view is an ultimately pessimistic view. It's the glass half empty view of the universe and of humanity. It's purposelessness, ultimately, it's emptiness, it's meaninglessness. It's the whole view of what happens when you take God out of the picture. It's Ecclesiastes. All is vanity, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. It's all empty. It's all meaningless. It's come from nowhere and it's going nowhere. And so that's the dark side, the down view. And what I'm arguing for then is that this is completely wrong, and there's another view, there's another way of doing life, there's another way of thinking, there's another atmosphere of mind, and this is the way we should be going. And this is then undergirded by the views of people like Thomas Reid, where there's a real God who's made us, and there's a wonderful balance between human faculties and the environment in which those faculties are functioning. One is suited to the other, and it's all about revealing the glory of God, the greatness of God. And God is at the center, and God is what imparts meaning both to creation and to humanity, to our souls, to our minds, to our thoughts. And that the whole atmosphere, therefore, is of reverence. It is dominated by this glorious revelation of God. We are under God. And there's a reality, there's a consistency about this way of looking at reality, I believe, and want to demonstrate, believe that can be demonstrated. So this idea that there are real agents, personal agents, that people do things, that you can't go any further back than saying someone did it. There's a personal, an ultimacy to the personal responsibility. You have real agents who really do things. It's not just something happening. And so at the bottom of everything, you have someone. All some things are a revelation of someone. And someone is primary over something. And you can't explain someone in terms of lots of some things. And this is related to the view of marriage. And of course, it's related to the idea that God is the ever blessed God. God is the God of eternal living reality. There is an interpersonality. There is a glorious sociability within the Trinity of persons eternally. This glorious singing being of delight and joy and blessedness, who beckons us to join him in this glorious happiness and joy. And of course, then this is an optimistic view of humanity. It's an optimistic view of the world. It's an optimistic view of history, that it's moving towards a grand finale, a grand marriage where humanity, redeemed humanity, is restored to the presence of God. And you have this picture of this eternal wedding between God and humanity. And the gospel then is, won't you come? Won't you come and join in? Won't you come and find your place in this glorious hope for the future? Okay, so how does this work out then in practice? What's the argument? How does this find its traction in our thinking? So these two ways then of looking, two ways of thinking, two ways of approaching life, the left brain, the right brain, up or down. Now, I think a good way of thinking about that is comparing a dictionary with a thesaurus. So a dictionary is very mechanical. A dictionary is very machine-like. So what happens is, and it's almost arbitrary, really. We have a system of letters, and those letters represent the different sounds that make up our language. And in English, we just have these 26 letters. And of course, there are a number of different sounds associated with each of these letters. And there's a whole area of study about how these sounds that are represented by the letters go together to make up words. But in a dictionary, we simply arbitrarily put the sounds in a certain order. We have this alphabet system, and we arbitrarily put an order. Well, whether it's arbitrary or not, it may not even be arbitrary, but there's a mechanical order, A, B, C, D, and so on. And we just put all of the words then, in terms of the sequence of letters, we order them in that particular order, starting with the first letter, all the A's first, but then we order all the words beginning with A according to the second letter, and the third letter, and the fourth letter, and so on. And we put them in what we call alphabetical order, but it doesn't really tell you anything about the relationships between all of these different words, and all the words represent different concepts. And so a dictionary is a tremendous muddle. Basically, it's a muddle of the order in the dictionary is arbitrary. It's nothing to do with the meanings of the words. It's just to do with the order of the sounds in those different words. And one thing that was associated with this right brain view, and I find this absolutely fascinating, is this man, Peter Roget. So he studied under Dugald Stewart, who was one of the heirs of Thomas Reid at Edinburgh University. And I find it fascinating because he was a man who struggled a lot with depression, with black dog syndrome. He struggled with dark mood swings and this feeling of darkness in his soul and in his life. And he found, fascinatingly, that a way to deal with his depression was by making lists. So there's a fascinating book. Let me show you this book. There we go. So it's a book there, The Man Who Made Lists, and it's a book by Joshua Kendall, The Love, Death, Madness, and Creation of Roget's Thesaurus. And he found then that making these lists, what he did was that he took the words in the English language and he began to put them together in a way where words with similar meanings would be together rather than words with similar sounds. And so ordering words according to meaning was the way he found that he could deal with his depression to some degree. So it was like a sort of self-medication for depression. And I find this absolutely fascinating. So here's Peter Roget, and this is the book that I was just showing you, Peter Mark Roget, and this is the book that describes him as the man who made lists and describes him as the man who self-medicated his own depression by making these lists. And when you start thinking about meanings, and when you start arranging words according to their meanings, you start asking big questions about what is it that what is the structure of meaning? What is the overall structure of meaning and of reality? And of course, you find out that our language is a way of mapping our view of the world. And so how you divide up, how you cut up the world, you have this wonderful picture of that Plato paints of language cutting nature at its joints, which is a wonderful expression, and I think it's getting at something that's fundamental and true. So language is seeking to cut nature up according to how it actually is. It's seeking to match. It's seeking to express language. It's seeking to make this good mirror of reality in sounds, in language. This marvelous ability that human beings have. And so when you look at all of language, and when you start sorting through all of language, and you start arranging all of the words and concepts according to, seeking to do this in an orderly manner, what do you find? What are the great chunks of meaning? What's the plan? What's the hierarchy? What's the category system that you end up with when you do that? And so this is Roget's way of arranging words according to concept, according to meaning. And so he has these six major divisions: abstract relations, the intellect, volition, space, matter, and the affections. And this is the structure of our worldview as expressed in our language. These are the great areas that we are interested in when we speak and when we think. And these two views of looking at reality then are expressed in the dictionary view as opposed to the thesaurus view. Is it sounds or is it meaning that's important? Is it the alphabet or a vision of meaning? And this is there is an introspective aspect to meaning. You can't really express meaning mechanically. It is an internal spiritual vision of meaning, and this is what was Roget was doing, this introspective assembling of words according to their meaning. Is it mechanical or is it semantical, with semantical being mental? And the importance of Roget's thesaurus, it's been a tool and a help for many generations now of writers and thinkers. It was tremendously useful for Roget. That's why he carried on doing it. But he thought, well, if it's useful for me, maybe it's useful for others. And indeed it was. Now, I think that this goes further and is more important and more fundamental. And I think that Tolkien has an idea of this, and he expresses it in his great work of fiction, The Lord of the Rings. He builds a fine old patient semantical wordsmith character. And here he is, Treebeard. He's a talking tree who knows the ancient tongues and is happy to turn word meanings over and over in his soul. This is the self-medication of Roget, dealing with depression, making word meanings turn over in your soul, and he finds healing here. And here's this Treebeard character who is very similar. And I believe that this is a very Christian thing. If you like, these are the words that could be the words of a Christian. Treebeard says it's a lovely language. This is the language of the Ents. But he says it takes a long time, a very long time, to say anything in it, because we do not say anything in it unless it's worth taking a long time to say and to listen to. So here you have somebody then who doesn't mind taking time to think hard about the meanings of words and wants to express meanings accurately, and is willing to spend time and feel that it's time well spent in doing that. So this is a good description of the Christian approach to semantics. A Christian loves words and their meanings and thinks of words as connected with God. And so words are exciting, words are interesting, words are precious, words are wonderful. So semantics is all about communion. Semantics is the stuff we love the most, and it is expressed with words. We are all of us wordsmiths. We are all of us poetic beings. We are all of us singers, and we love music and we love love. And we need to find expression in this wonderful ability that we have to turn. It's the magic, isn't it? It's the magic of being a person. So what is semantics? The word semantics comes from the Greek word meaning signs. It's to do with signs. Signs signify. Signs allow us to perform this strange alchemy, this strange magic of transferring meanings from one soul through space and time to another soul. Semantics is the study of that fascinating reality, study of meaning. Words are signs that we use to express meaning and to have relationships with one another. Our relationships depend so much on our words, don't they? We all realize that. What we say to each other is so significant. We recognize that in certain ceremonies. At the center of marriage are the vows, and these are key words that are spoken in public, that are witnessed, and they are serious. And everything about the marriage service and about a marriage is intended to underline and highlight this reality, that these are serious, that this is one-time reality. And they're so important. They're the foundation of the family. They're the foundation of that wonderful relationship that is intended to be lifelong, and the foundation of all society. So I'll pause there for the moment.